Hey Cameron, it's Wednesday, which means we're back on schedule for our Bible study. This week we're going to cover the second half of the book of Ruth, and I'm excited about this. Ruth is a short book, so it's just 4 chapters, so that makes it an easy 2-part Bible study. And that's good. I sort of, it's interesting. I grew up hearing the story of Ruth. I can remember, as a kid, good evangelical parents. My mom, she made sure we watched a lot of kind of Bible story cartoons and so forth. And I can remember hearing and watching the story of Ruth, but it's been good to go through and kind of I don't know that I've read it much in detail since seminary. So that's been nice to kind of come back and look at it again. And I was talking with our good friend, Father Michael Kablosh this morning. He came by the office. Father Kablosh, of course, is the Russian Orthodox priest whose congregation rents space in our auxiliary building for their worship services. And Father Kablosh and I have become good friends. And so I asked him, I said, hey, you want to guest star on this week's Bible study? We could tag team this thing and do it together. And he goes, oh, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're going to do Ruth. He goes, no. He said, I haven't read it since seminary. So it is good. It's good that we can take the time to attend to these books that sometimes get a little overlooked. Maybe some traditions are reading Ruth with greater regularity than others. But, all scripture is worth our attention and worth consideration. And so, especially those books that maybe we don't read as frequently, it's good to kind of go through and remind ourselves of them. Let's begin in chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? And now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, and do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do. She said to her, all that you say I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drinking, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward. And behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? And she said, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. And then he said, you may be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. And now it is true, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Again he said, give me the cloak that is on you and hold it. So she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me. For he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And when she said that, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. And when he said to the closest relative, "Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here, and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it. But if not, tell me, that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance." And the closest relative said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it." Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption and the exchange of land. To confirm any matter, a man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So the closest relative said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased may not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today." And all the people who were in the court and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem. Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord shall give you by this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord enabled her to conceive. She gave birth to a son. And the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. And the neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Amminadab, and to Amminadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David. And that ends the book of Ruth and takes us to the book of Samuel. And Samuel, of course, much longer and much more intricate. But we will find out what happens to the sons of Obed, Jesse, and David in the book of Samuel. But let's focus on these last 2 chapters of Ruth. These last 2 chapters are kind of interesting because it involves a lot of Jewish, Israelite, Middle Eastern culture and customs that would seem very foreign to us. Let's look at Naomi's advice on how Ruth should go about trying to get Boaz's attention. Naomi, I think Naomi can tell, number one, that Ruth is probably, she's an attractive young lady. Scripture doesn't give us that description, but it's not, not hard to imagine. She has caught Boaz's eye. And Boaz is a little older, but he's well established and fairly wealthy, doing well for himself. And they're kind of related to Boaz. And in those days, you kind of kept things in the family. We can look back at the Torah, the law of Moses. For example, if a man had a wife and he died, his brother was kind of expected to step in there and raise the children and so forth. So, family is kind of everything. And you have to be careful, you don't want to cross bloodlines too much. But to remember that Ruth is a Moabitess. She's not of this bloodline. She married into the family, but now she's a widow. Naomi has come home to Bethlehem, and she's trying to figure out what's good. And you can tell that Naomi and Ruth love each other. She calls her here. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you?" And, I don't think that's just shorthand. When Naomi calls her daughter, I think she means that. I think she has kind of come to accept that Ruth is the only close family she has. And she kind of sees Ruth not as a daughter-in-law, but as a daughter, right? And I think that's reciprocal. I think Ruth is not just looking out for her own future and best interest. Ruth is also looking out for Naomi as someone would for their mother. So Naomi's basically saying, "Now is not Boaz your kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight." In other words, Ruth, pay attention here. Now, Boaz is eligible. And he's successful, and you know him. You've worked with his maids. Isn't he a nice guy? Didn't you like him? Isn't he a gentleman? He's a faithful guy. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes. In other words, girl, go get ready. And, so you're like, oh, okay, she's going on a meet and greet. She's going on a date. I don't know if you'd call it a date. He certainly hasn't invited her. This would be akin to, I guess in my generation, like if you kind of know that a girl's gonna be at a party or gonna be somewhere, you're like, well, I could go to that party, and so you you kind of get yourself, dressed up to go to that party. You don't know, but maybe you want to make a good impression. And, do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be, now this is the weird, it shall be that when he lies down, evidently he's going to, at the threshing floor there, he's going to lay down. You shall notice the place where he lies. You shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. And then he'll tell you what you shall do. So, at the threshing floor, he's going to be taking a nap after dinner. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on ancient Hebrew dating practices. I don't. I barely understood 20th century American dating practices, okay? It's tough sometimes. I went on a lot of first dates. But this is this weird thing. She's going to uncover his feet, and Naomi's telling her this. And so, what kind of inside information did Naomi have? Like, did Boaz have poor circulation, and Naomi knew that his feet would get cold and that would wake him up? I don't know. Honestly, I do not know. But this is what she does, and you shall lay down, and all that you say I will do. So Ruth does this. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. I mean, he's taking a nap next to the grain. It's just, Why? Why did he just go home to his bed? I don't know. And she came secretly and uncovered his feet and laid down. And it happened in the middle of the night. The man was startled and bent forward. And I'm thinking, his feet are uncovered. Maybe they got cold. Mine do. But also maybe he kind of felt her down at his feet. And he, sat up, startled. And it happened in the middle of the night. The man was startled, bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative." And then he said, "May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." Now, I want to speak about this, and I want to be gentle, and I certainly don't want to be lewd. But, the Bible is not a book of, just niceties. There is much more to Scripture than, say, the Beatitudes. And as my great aunt June, who I call Aunt Sitter, used to say, she and my grandfather used to sort of laugh about this. They'd say, if they ever made a movie of the Bible and they didn't leave anything out, it would be rated R. There's a lot of sex and violence in the story of the Bible, and that's true because it's a book about God's saving us, and we needed saving because of our human frailty, and so much of human frailty is expressed through sex and violence. Let's look at what happens. Now, I'm not going to try to explain everything about these customs because, quite honestly, I don't know everything about these customs. They're pretty ancient customs. When we're talking before the kings, before the monarchy, in that period of the judges, were a little murky. Things were a little different. But she uncovers the man's feet, and she lays down by his feet. They're in this grain barn. So what does that mean? I think that tells us a few things about their character. Boaz took his meal and slept next to the grain, which means that he was there to oversee the work being done. And I think that tells us a little bit about his own work ethic and integrity. He didn't just stay in his big house and tell his servants to handle it. He went down there himself to deal with it. And he was willing to stay late into the evening to see that the work got done. Now, Boaz is a bit of an older gentleman, but that he sleeps next to the grain. He's not going to go sleep in his big house. If there's work to be done, he's going to be on site to manage it. And then let's think about this. Now, Boaz is, a successful guy. He's a nice guy. But Ruth does not try to slip into the bed next to him. She uncovers his feet. She lays at his feet. It's a move to kind of tell him that she is available as far as being, to be married, but that she is going to act with propriety. She's as he puts it, known to be a woman of excellence, and that her virtue is something that she maintains throughout this process. Now, Ruth is in a precarious situation. She is financially struggling. She and Naomi. I mean, literally last week we read how they are, gleaning the fields, kind of doing what beggars do almost, dependent upon charity just to feed themselves. She has already been married. So, she's already kind of seen, she's a widow. And a lot of times I think we as adults turn a blind eye to virtue and Christian virtue after marriage, right? The rules still apply. God ordains us to be intimate with our spouse. Okay? So human intimacy is for spousal relationships. And that's not just for young people before they're ever married. That's for people who are no longer married. Widowers, divorcees, your virtue remains, okay? Men and women. So what the church phrases that as, we are called as Christians, not just clergy, not just the saints. All Christians are called, required to be celibate in our singleness, okay? And that almost sounds crazy in modern times. Modernity is so inundated with a culture of promiscuity and just rampant sexuality. Here's the thing. I know this is not the most delicate, but this is important. We are not animals. We are not slaves to our instincts. Human beings have had sexual desire for as long as there have been human beings. That's where human beings come from. And I don't want to be indelicate about this, but human sexuality is a gift of God. But like every gift of God, it was given to us to be used in a responsible manner. And the call of the church, of God's ordained purpose for that, is that it be within the bounds of marriage. Now, one could imagine, here is a young woman. She's pretty desperate. She needs a husband. Naomi understands this. You need to be taken care of. That she could have tried to seduce Boaz in an effort to kind of shore up or expedite this relationship. But Naomi's not having it. Ruth's not having it. Boaz isn't having it. Boaz respects this woman's virtue. So I think that Ruth and Boaz stand, each of them, individually and together, stand as examples of godly virtue. Oftentimes I think we expect that the ladies are supposed to be mindful of their virtue, and that they're responsible for making sure that men respect their virtue. Christian gentlemen should be just as mindful of their own virtue, just as mindful. And we should be mindful of one another's virtue. That's part of respecting each other. Who did God call you to be? And how did God call you to act? And how did God call you to treat one another? So respecting one another and honoring and respecting ourselves and our honor and our virtue is the duty of every Christian, both man and woman. So Ruth is letting him know that, I guess I could put this in a bit more common parlance. She's available and she is interested, but she's not going to fool around. And Boaz respects that. he is wise enough and a gentleman to see, to recognize her propriety, not as prudishness, but as a quality to be revered. She is a lady. So he also recognizes that there is another relative who is closer in relation to Naomi and therefore Ruth. And then according to the laws, that other relative has kind of first rights of refusal. So he has to talk to this relative and do right by his family and do right by the laws of Moses. Even though he very much at this point cares about Ruth, he very much probably, I think he's very clear he wants to marry Ruth. He's saying, look, but I've got to go through the right channels. Now I want you to think about that idea, even though it's a very foreign concept, I've got to let my, but that idea of propriety trumping emotion and love. Boaz is probably at this point has seen Ruth, seen what a hard worker, seen what a good lady, seen what a quality of her character. He wants to make her his wife. But his emotional desire for her as a spouse, his duty to his family, to his God, and to the law are paramount to his emotion. So he puts his principles above his desire. This is not the narrative of the world. What is the world? To follow your heart. We have these I think of these terrible movies. They seem like they all star Richard Gere. Where, I think of, The Runaway Bride. I remember I watched that years ago. Where, Julia Roberts was engaged to, I forget the other actor. I think it was the guy from Law and Order SVU. And he's a perfectly nice guy. He's a good guy. And she's engaged to him. And then Richard Gere comes to town and steals her away. And it seems like he was in, 5 or 6 movies where he's always stealing somebody's girlfriend or their wife or something. And he's supposed to be the hero of the movie, right? They followed their heart. No. That's not what Ruth is telling us. Boaz met his obligations. Boaz stuck to his principles. Boaz kept his self-respect. And in doing so, kept his respect in the community. No one will question Boaz's integrity because he acts with integrity. And integrity is doing the hard thing, even when you want to do something that's less fun. Integrity is sticking to your principles when your emotions want to run out from under you. Being a person of principle, being a lady or a gentleman, being a Christian and practicing our faith is putting the commandments of God above our desires and getting our priorities right and doing it the right way. So Boaz in chapter 4, chapter 4 is funny. I was thinking back to those cartoons that I mentioned where I watched, kind of the story of Ruth in those cartoons. The cartoons always leave out chapter 4 because it's boring. It's what does he do? He has to go and meet with this relative, and they sit down together, and there's really no argument. It's almost this kind of a legal discussion. They bring witnesses, and they basically decide, what do we do with Naomi? We have a familial obligation here, and there's, her husband had entitled to some land. And so if you take responsibility for that, you're also taking responsibility for Naomi. And there's this young widow Ruth who is part of the deal. And so the family member, after considering, says, well, maybe I'd like to have had the land, and certainly we don't want anything bad to happen to cousin Naomi, but I can't take on this situation with Ruth. And so he says, Boaz says, well, then will you allow me, I'm next in line, would you allow me to move forward? And sure. And they exchange his sandals. He's like, flip-flop. He's like, this is a deal. And they exchange. And I love how the scripture explains that. I just love that. I'm trying to find that verse that we read. Verse 7, chapter 4, verse 7. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption and the exchange of land. To confirm any matter, a man removed his sandal and gave it to another. And this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So you didn't just give your hand on it. You didn't just give your word on it. You gave your sandal on it. Like that was the contract. Like I have your footprint. Yep, smells like you. This is your sandal. This is my land. What a weird. But I love how the fact that even the Bible's like, now look, this was weird. This is how they used to do it. That, to me, that little detail, I love those little details like that. Like that lends itself, in my mind, to the truth of the matter. Like, if you ever watch a movie, and it's, we watched Dr. Dolittle the other night with the kids. And of course, y'all know Dr. Dolittle. He talks to the animals. This was the new Dr. Dolittle with Robert Downey Jr. It was fine, but I don't recommend it. But anyway, he's got all these animals, and it's set in Victorian England, like in the 1800s. That's when the movie is set. And yet, all the animals, they hired a bunch of famous people to play the voices of the animals, speak in modern vernacular. They use modern little jokes and modern phrasing, and it's all modern idiom. And now, of course, it's a children's movie, and so these animals are talking, and they want the children to get it. But I found it jarring the entire time that all the people were speaking, sort of proper Victorian English, and all the animals speak like you hear kids talk on the playground. And, that happens a lot of times when we're telling a story and we're trying to convey, oh, this happened a long time ago. Often those kind of made up stories, the characters end up using anachronism, right? They end up doing something or saying something that's more modern than makes sense in the setting or time period of that story. And so I think little bits like this where the author, and many scholars think that Samuel was actually the author of this story, but that the author takes the time to say, now look, here's what happened. They made a deal, and the guy gave him his sandal. And this was this is how this is how contracts were sort of done on land. Land contract was done on sandals. And I don't know where that comes from. I really don't know. The closest reference I could think of would be when the Lord told Moses to take off his shoes on holy ground. So maybe there was some kind of a connection between land and sandals. I don't know if that is in any way relevant here, but I can't think of any other reference biblically between land and footwear. So, there it is. But Boaz goes through this process. And he makes his intention clear. Now look, you have the first right of refusal. This is, kind of the deal, but I'm next in line. And if you don't want this, I will be glad to step up. So I'd like your permission. And very proper. Because again, he's not here to offend his family. Like, what if he had just said, I love Ruth with all my heart, to heck with my family, to heck with the, proper way of doing things. I'm just going to have her as my wife. Well, ruins his relationship with his family, ruins his standing in the community, and also it's going to hurt Ruth's reputation, right? Her position in the community is going to be looked down upon. And that's something, propriety, and it's not a word you hear a lot anymore, but something that my dad used to say is that, son, you not only have to act appropriately and do the right thing, you cannot even give the hint or raise any suspicion of impropriety. You can't just do the right thing. You have to look like you're doing the right thing. And I remember he would talk to me, especially when it was about dating or things. He would say, don't be out past curfew. That's not just about you meeting your obligation. That's also about the young lady's reputation. That she's not seen or perceived by her peers as being out too late with you. And so it's not just your reputation or even your obedience to the regulations, it's about how you appear and what's appropriate. So that Boaz makes that effort because it's not just his integrity and his reputation and his relationship to his whole family and standing in his community. But if he is going to marry Ruth, that affects her. That affects her. So this is going to sound strange probably to modern America, but by very carefully and precisely following the regulations and customs of his people, he is actually loving Ruth. He is loving her by looking out for her future, that she is seen as a woman of excellence and that she is respected as a lady. And if that meant, what if his relative had said, oh no, I've seen her around, she's a nice girl and I'd be glad to have her as a wife. Then Boaz would rather have his own heart broken for the sake of Ruth's reputation, her life, her standing in the community. He would rather have his heart broken than hurt Ruth. Ruth might have been sad about it. Ruth might have thought to herself, I don't want to marry some stranger. I don't know this other guy. Boaz, principles first. You do the right thing. You do the right thing even when it's the hard thing. As they say, I'm told at West Point, that a hard right versus an easier wrong is still right versus wrong. That's hard. It's hard when our hearts are telling us one thing because we want something than doing what we know to be and are taught is right. And our culture doesn't help. Our culture has sort of somehow convinced us that our emotions are always the right thing to do. Well, if you love someone, you should just act on it immediately. Don't think about consequences. That is not the way of Christ. It's not even smart. All our actions have consequences. All our actions have consequences. So I think Ruth and Boaz, their marriage and their romance, we can learn a lot from them. Now, I'm not telling anyone to go on a date by uncovering someone's feet while they're asleep and sleeping at their feet. I'm not saying that. But I also think, look at where Ruth goes. Boaz is working. He's at work. He ate dinner. And he was just working. It wasn't like he was at a fancy restaurant. It wasn't like, oh, it was some magical ball where a princess wore glass slippers. No. She went down to where he worked and demonstrated that she was a worker and that she cared about him and that she also had character and values and self-respect and a virtue. That's what impressed Boaz. She took a bath and got dressed. I mean, she looked nice. She didn't just show up, terrible. But Boaz, he's not enamored with her beauty. He says she's a woman of excellence. It's her character. It's her, I think, work ethic. I think her obvious love for Naomi. It's the quality of who she is that impresses Boaz. Proverbs 31 tells us that charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who loves the Lord is more precious than gold. So, I think there's a lesson for all of us. Why does Ruth seek after Boaz? Did it say he was some handsome young prince? No. In fact, Boaz says, you didn't go after some young guy. Boaz is, I don't know how much older Boaz is, but probably a fair bit. I mean, maybe he's of Naomi's generation or closer to Naomi's age. And yet Ruth sees his virtue. This is a gentleman. This is a man of his word. This is a man who works hard. This is a man who is who has the right set of values. This is a man of faith. Those are things you build a life around. Those are things you can build a family with. Who is Ruth? Is she pretty? Well, probably. I mean, she got herself dressed up and she wore nice clothes. And I don't know, maybe Naomi helped her with her hair. I don't know. I'm sure she looked perfectly fine. But what Boaz is old enough, he's not a fool, is he recognizes this is a woman of character. This is a woman of faith. This is a woman of dedication and who loves her family. Hardworking woman. But look how she cares for Naomi. Look how loyal to Naomi she is. And if she is that good of a daughter-in-law, imagine how faithful and hardworking of a wife she will be. That is a woman you can build a life with. That is a woman you want to build a family with. That's a woman you can depend on. Those are the things. Those are the things that matter. And when we think about marriage, those are the things we ought to consider. Virtue, character, integrity, work ethic, mutual respect. These are the values that it seems to me that Ruth and Boaz both exhibit and see in one another. It's a good lesson for us. It's a good lesson for us. So, the world will tell you that what's important is being good looking, and that's about it. And if you're attracted to somebody, throw caution to the wind. Beauty is skin deep and it fades. Every day I look in the mirror, I wonder where that good-looking, thin young man was who I used to see in there. And he's been gone a while now. What I hope is in there is somebody of faith and integrity who is loyal to his family and who works hard to love and provide. And I certainly see tremendous values in my wife. I always say this, I married Kate for a lot of reasons, But two of the most important is I trust Kate. She is the most honest person that I've ever met. I trust Kate more than I trust myself. And I respect Kate. I value her opinion, and I listen. She doesn't always know that I'm listening, but I listen. And when I met her, it didn't take me long to figure out this is the kind of woman that you build a life with. And the good Lord was tapping me on the shoulder, talking. This is it, son. Don't mess this up. So that's a lot of Kate in that for me. So anyway, hope that helps you on Ruth. It was a fun book to read that, to review that, and to hear that story again. I think those are some lessons that we need to hear in today's society, especially we as Christians. We have got to live differently than the world. We have to be differently than the world. And that's even down in our very core, how we discipline our own emotions and desires and principle them under our commitments to Christ. We love you. Have a great week. Talk to you later.